Welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. We have a very special guest on the program this week. Liberia's Vice President, Mr. Joseph Boakai, was in the country and had a meeting with Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo. Mr. Boakai stated that Nigeria remains a very important big brother to Liberia, recognizing Nigeria's sacrifices for the country, especially through ECOMOG and the United Nations mission in Liberia, UNMIL. We had a chat with him on the purpose of his visit, Liberia's relations with Nigeria, and Liberia's upcoming elections in October next year. Plus, we continue to monitor the situation in Syria as Turkey records its first death in the campaign against ISIS. These are up ahead after a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles.
The UN Security Council holds its ballot Monday until a consensus is reached on a candidate to replace UN Secretary General Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who steps down at the end of this year after spending 2 terms in office. One of the leading candidates for the top job is former UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Antonio Guterres. The UN Secretary General suggested his successor must be a convener, facilitator, an honest broker, and a bridge builder. Mr. Ban had called for a surge in diplomacy for peace to prevent conflict and crisis rather than tackle their consequences. After the second UN Security Council secret ballot on August the 5th, Mr. Guterres was ahead of 11 other candidates. People marched and attended rallies from Perth and Adelaide to Melbourne to Sydney, holding signs and shouting slogans. Bring them here! Bring them here! Under Australian law, people trying to reach the country by boat are sent to processing camps on tiny Pacific islands and are never eligible for resettlement in Australia. Some asylum seekers have spent years in the camps, which have been criticized by the United Nations and human rights groups over harsh conditions and reports of abuse. Although successful governments have supported the hardline immigration policies, members of the Australian Greens do not.
We know that there's only one solution. Close the camps, bring them here, and let them stay.
Venezuela and Iran have promised to continue to seek consensus on ways to stabilize oil market and strengthen OPEC. Both countries signed agreement between their central banks to strengthen ties. Venezuela, since the collapse of oil prices in 2014, has sought to rally support among OPEC and non-OPEC nations to boost crude prices by limiting production. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, however, has remained more focused on retaining market share, with heavyweight Saudi Arabia showing little interest in backing output cuts. Finally, US Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump said on Saturday he would seek to develop a tracking system to ensure illegal immigrants who overstay their visas are removed from the United States. Under fire for giving mixed messages on the signature issue, illegal immigration, Trump used a campaign speech in Des Moines to provide some fresh details. Under fire for giving mixed messages on the signature issue, illegal immigration, Trump used a campaign speech in Des Moines to provide some fresh details.
On day one, I'm going to begin swiftly removing criminal, illegal immigrants from this country, including removing the hundreds and thousands of criminal, illegal immigrants that have been released into the United States and United States communities under the incompetent Obama-Clinton administration. We're going to build a great wall on the border, and we're going to institute nationwide E-Verify, stop illegal immigrants from accessing welfare and entitlements, and develop an exit entry, and you know what that is, exit entry system to ensure those who overstay their visas that they're quickly removed. We don't enforce our visa expiration dates, then we have open borders and we have nothing but crime. It's going to end.
A Turkish soldier in the fight against ISIS was killed over the weekend when Kurdish fighters fired on their armored tanks. Turkish soldiers had crossed the border in an operation aimed at the Islamic State and Kurdish forces in the area. Turkey says it will continue with the campaign until there is no longer a terror threat from Syria as regards Islamic State and the Kurds.
It will be the first casualty Turkey would experience since joining the fight to not only rescue its neighbor, but protect the violence from spilling beyond its borders. The incident in which the Turkish soldier was killed happened in the town of Jarablus on Saturday. Sources said a rocket was fired from territory held by the Kurdish YPG militia on a tank close to the town. One soldier was killed, 3 others wounded. Sadly, it would not only be the only attack against Turkey by the YPG. Same Saturday, suspected Kurdish militants fired rockets at the airport in the main southern city of Diyarbakir, where there were no immediate report of casualty. 4 rockets were fired at a police checkpoint outside the VIP lounge, and passengers and staff were taken inside the terminal building for safety. Diyarbakir is the main city in the country's largest Kurdish southeast, where Kurdish militants have waged a 3-decade insurgency. The attack comes days after Turkey launched a military incursion into Syria aimed at driving back Islamic State and preventing territorial gains by Kurdish fighters. Turkey already has the support of some of the rebels who helped in fighting Kurdish-backed forces in northern Syria. Turkey also says it has launched airstrikes against both Kurdish militia fighters and Islamic State. Meanwhile, Turkish warplanes and artillery struck targets held by the Kurdish YPG militia north of Syria. There were no immediate comment from the YPG militia, but forces aligned with the Kurdish group had said on Saturday that no Kurdish militia had been in areas being targeted by Turkish troops or its allies. Turkey, which has been battling Kurdish insurgents on its own soil, sent soldiers, tank and other military hardware into Syria on Wednesday last week in support of Syrian rebel allies and seized the Syrian frontier town of Jarablus from the IS militants. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said on Sunday Turkish warplanes had struck areas north of Manbij, a city south of Jarablus, captured by Kurdish-aligned Syrian Democratic Forces this month in a US-backed operation. And while Turkish forces attacked the YPG and Islamic forces, the Turkish Red Crescent distributed its first batch of humanitarian aid in Jarablus on Friday, 3 days after forces seized the border town from the Islamic State. Footage released by the Turkish army showed residents strolling through the streets controlled by Free Syrian Army rebels and crowds gathering to receive food rations delivered by the Red Crescent workers.
When we come back...
You see, the mistake we make is that we believe that when you talk about leadership, you mean presidency. That's not my belief of leadership.
Our interview with Liberian Vice President Joseph Boakai. Do stay with us.